Oh, did I do it? Hey everyone, how you doing? Dan, if you can hear me. Hi Dan. Hi everyone.
Happy 9 months.
Oh, thank you so much. We've been affiliated stream for 9 months. 9 months? Has it really been that long? Thank you everyone so much for streaming, for becoming subscribers. It's very sweet of you. But let me introduce my very, very beautiful, my very, very lovely friends, Daniel Foytik. Daniel, how have you been?
Good. How have you been, Nico?
I'm a little bit hyped up in sugar. I've currently had about the equivalent of 4 pancakes. I've got content warning foods. Like I got gifted a little snack box today. I don't know if you should be able to see it. These are like cinnamon swirls, but in pancake form from Norway, and they're like 80% sugar. So I'm like, I am
nothing
toasted.
wrong with that.
I should also say I had all these pancakes within the space of about 20 minutes before I started talking to you. So,
well, that explains all the extra energy today, Nico.
I know. I'm just a little boy with a sugar addiction, trying to make it through life.
That's right.
Don't at me. Just let me live my life. You know?
Well, I owe you probably another shipment of jelly beans then. I'm sure you've eaten all those.
I'm telling you, so chat knows this already. But my jelly bean addiction, it got to the point where I was ordering about 3 kilograms of jelly beans, which is, I think that's 6.6 pounds. Yeah, it is 1 kilo. Yeah, 6.5 pounds worth of jelly beans. I was like, this is for the streams, because I had like a redemption up where it's like people can sort of like say, Nico, have a jelly bean. And it's like, oh, thank you, are you here for the corgi train? And it was like
Corgo 1, 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 Corgo 1.
Thank you for the corgis. It got to the point where it's like, Nico, you
I
cannot...
am sorry.
No, you're fine. Absolutely. Thank you for the corgi train. It got to the point where chat and my friends then were saying, Nico, you need to stop the jelly beans. This is getting to the point where you are 80% bean. And it's like, maybe you're right. And there was like a week where I went off the jelly beans and my energy levels just crashed because it wasn't getting the sugar it needed. And then it came back up to normal. And it's like, oh, right. This was like a legit addiction to sugar. So, thank you for the offer. Please don't send me beans. I'm not allowed beans anymore. But welcome to the show, Daniel. Daniel.
Well, thanks for having me.
Me being all posh, not calling you Dan. So, I'll kind of introduce both. So, for people who don't know, this is my incredibly talented friend, Daniel Foytik. We actually go way, 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 way back. Daniel Foytik, way back in 2015, way back when I used to be a waiter, was the person who gave me my first break. The legend goes, or rather the story goes, is that I wanted to make video game music, and I put up a little SoundClouds together with some tracks that I'd made. Nothing fancy. I mean, I was using free software, I think, at the time. It was on like a really old 7-year-old MacBook, which was knackered. I think it cost me about £200 to get this MacBook, and I was just wanting to make music. Put it online, pull it onto a Facebook forum where it's like Facebook video game composers thing. And one day Daniel came up onto it and he was like, hey, I need some music for my podcast. And I think it was Victoria's Lift. Back then it was called The Lift. Mm-hmm. And you're basically saying, hey, I need the music. There's no money involved, but basically no one's getting paid. So it was like, if you'd like to get a start, if you want to be a part of a podcast, hit me up. And at that point, I hadn't actually heard of a podcast. But I took him up on it. Within like, I think an hour, you responded, because I remember writing it all on Facebook. Oh my God, it's already happening. People already want me to make music. I remember getting really excited about it. And it took off from there. You kind of introduced me to the world of podcasting. Because I apart from like radio shows, like BBC Radio 4 would sometimes do like a little addition of an hour and put it into a podcast. I had no idea people were making podcasts themselves outside of like the really, really big established sort of radio stations. And what's more is that I didn't realise it was audio drama, which is what you do, what you champion. Your tagline is giving stories a voice, the 9th story tagline. And it kind of blew up from there. I'll just turn down the music because the music's blaring in my face. But yeah, Daniel Foytik is the creator of Victoria's Lift, The Wicked Library, and Ninth Story podcast. Stop me if I'm saying too much, but you are the creator, the founder, the producer, the editor, the voice actor, the script editor, the actual audio editor. And some of the shows you're the soundscape editor, you find the sounds yourself. In fact, pretty much the only thing you don't do yourself is make the music yourself, which is lucky for me because it helps me slide in through the door. But believe me when I say this, chap, Daniel Foytik knows every single layer of how to make a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I've started to hand off some of those things as we've gotten bigger and grown, and I needed to do things like read and eat and watch a TV show and pet my dog and things like that. So I'm very much a perfectionist. It's especially whenever we're talking about an audio format where everything is in the ear. I've been very particular about who I work with in terms of voice actors and composers and where I get my sound from. And, I've tried having others do sound design work for me. And it's just been very recently that I actually finally found somebody that, was a good fit and that I think the quality is where it needs to be. But I mean, for me, it's whenever you're dealing with audio and that's all you get, there's no image, there's no text, there's just the sound in your ears. It's very important that it be as pristine and clean and well done as possible. I know not everybody listens in headphones like these, but this is what I produce for, so I mean, it's going to sound, most people are using, the little earbuds that came with their phone or, what's in their car and that kind of thing. So you and I probably overproduce things, but I think that's a good place to start, is at the top rather than, sounding like you're recording in a basement with echoes.
I think also it's better off, for me personally, editing with the vision that the person's listening to this almost the same setup as you have, that being the best setup you can possibly have for podcasts. Because I think people are so used to technology now that they know when they're listening in the car or when they're just listening, like, not even speakers, but just straight off your phone speaker. Mm-hmm. I feel like people factor that in. So if something sounds good from tiny little crappy speakers, it's going to make them want to put on the good headphones.
Yeah.
Not to have it sort of when you're at the gym, but like when you sort of sit down and like, okay, so this is my weekly moment where I am going to go and listen to this podcast because this is one of my favorite podcasts. But to get us all started, to the chat, please send your questions. I've asked the mods to sort of collate questions. There's also a spreadsheet as well, which I'm not entirely sure if we put it in the chat or if it's in the Discord, but there is a spreadsheet of questions as well. This stream is going to be about an hour long, so we're really sorry we missed any questions, but we're going to try and get through most of them, and we'll very especially want to answer the question how to get started. So with that said, Daniel Foytik, Daniel, what made you want to start podcasts? What made you want to choose podcasting over any other format?
Well, I mean, I came to it as a writer, and I came to it with, what I first started was Ninth Story Podcast, which was, started out with just me and a friend talking about stories and storytelling and, kind of how it is all encompassing, and it is in everything from, movies, obviously TV shows, to commercials and advertising and, traditional old folk tales and everything like that. So essentially, Ninth Story gave me an opportunity to kind of talk to a lot of people that were smarter than me about storytelling and how storytelling works and why storytelling is important to us as people. We're storytelling machines as humans. So I explored a lot of that. And I also started writing some things as part of doing it. Victoria started out just as a mascot for Ninth Story. I wanted kind of this spooky little music box sound and the little girl that had it. And she kind of grew into a little bit more as time went on. Mm-hmm. And I started writing episodes stories, writing in prose form stories for Victoria and the lift and the building and all that stuff. I also, around that time, after a couple seasons of doing Ninth Story, my friend Nelson Piles was the original creator of the Wicked Library. He hosted it for the first 5 seasons, and he was looking to retire and kind of go off and do more writing and that type of thing. So he asked me to step in and take over, which I did. And after doing a full season of that, I had exposure to so many talented writers, and kind of got under my belt the idea of what it takes to mix and edit audio and put music behind it and kind of create an immersive experience. So Victoria's Lift was kind of the next step for me. It became a true audio drama in the sense of, there being effects and, wouldn't say it was a true audio drama to start off. It was more of an enhanced audio experience. So, everything was written in prose form, and the narrator would read, usually me in the beginning, the entire story and play all the parts except for Victoria, which was played by Amber Collins from Australia. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. Is just, I love story. I love storytelling. I love listening to stories, and I love live storytelling. I actually did another short-lived podcast called Listen, where I recorded live storytellers at storytelling events, including someone from your neck of the woods, Daniel Morden, who he's actually from Wales, not England, but
but it's UK.
Yes, it's still in the UK.
I think for me, I come from the other side. So my I keep looking there because my camera's usually there, but I've put it here so that we're both facing. So sorry if I keep looking to the side, everyone. Working in so many podcasts, the thing that I think makes a successful podcast is the people who had the idea first, who built the world first. What I mean by that is, if you're sitting down and thinking, I want to make a podcast, before you've got any idea of what you want to do, those ones generally fail. The ones that I've found succeed, especially in the audio drama world, are the people who've kind of developed this world in their heads. They've already built the world. So lots of people here know the Magnus Archives. Jonathan Sims thought about the world of the Magnus Archives before he put pen to paper and started writing the statements. And I think that's true with your Victoria's Lift, is that you knew about the main character being Victoria, and you knew the kind of stories you wanted to tell. You worked out how to turn it into an audio drama, into a podcast, seconds. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. Like you see it. I think you see this in every single medium of art. Like for me, it's like I hear a lot of people saying they want to make an album in music, but they just want to know how it feels to have an album. They're not thinking about what the music they want to make. So they'll fill out 10, 12 tracks, and maybe one of those tracks may be good, and the other 11 tracks are only there because they wanted like a full thing. To that end, I'd say if you're starting out, planning and writing before you even start making your third podcast, I think is really, really important. Because you will kind of find the podcasting, to make a podcast is really, really heavy. It's a lot more work than you realize.
Yes, it is.
And if you've not got something to fall back, if you've not already got that end goal in mind, or like the worlds to fall back on, when you have to make choices and you have to edit the story to go in one way than you originally thought, it's much, much easier to do that when you've already got a backup plan, as opposed to, I can't make my story be set in the middle of Victorian London. What's going to happen? I mean, you've already written Victoria, so all you do is like put in a library, put in a quiet place, and it's a completely different setting. But if you've not figured that part out, I think it's much harder. Thank you, Dan. That was a really good start to the question. So, my next question, I've kind of done a couple of questions to get it started, and then we'll go into the floor. Okay. So my next question to you is, how much experience did you have before you started making podcasts? Were you a voice actor first for other things, or did you just go straight into it nose first?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I have some theater experience from whenever I was in high school, but that's a lifetime ago, almost 30 years ago now, over 30 years ago. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in voices and accents and sounds. Something I used to do just goofing around with friends is, you know, coming up with different accents, different sounds, different voices. But I mean, really, I think it just came from listening to a lot of old time radio whenever I was growing up. I mean, it's stuff that was
Yeah.
much older than me. And also, you know, audio drama started to take off. There was Welcome to Night Vale. I mean, I got into podcasting well before I even understood that there was such a thing as audio drama in current podcasting. I mean, I think there were only a couple really whenever I first started doing it. I mean, when I first really delved into Victoria's Lift, there were a lot more, and there's really been an explosion since then. Not that I had anything to do with that. It's just, you know, kind of where people have gone. Right? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I came to it as a writer first. You know, world building and creating Victoria and writing little stories and having ideas about what her building would be, being a big fan of the Twilight Zone and Fantasy Island and Night Gallery and, you know, of traditional fables and folk tales where, you know, their morality plays really. And, you know, there's somebody that comes to a point where they have to make a decision or a choice, and based on how they decide is, you know, kind of how the rest of the story plays out. And you can find a lot of those elements in Victoria's Lift. The Wicked Library is a little more simple in terms that it's they're more like short. Well, they're short stories for the most part. We have done some audio drama on that show as well. But for the most part, it's short stories by independent and small publication horror authors. Like Neil Gaiman has been on the show once.
Yeah,
So
it still blows me away.
you know,
So you got Neil Gaiman on
there's
there.
those little guys.
The
But
little guys.
but mostly it's a lot of smaller press and indie horror fiction, and part of the goal is to help fans of the genre find new artists and authors that they like, because, you know, when you're in a small indie format or you're working for a small press, you don't have the powerhouse promotion behind you that, you know, the bigger presses have. So that's part of what we do. Victoria's Lift's a little different in that we do all invited stories. So anybody who writes for the show gets an invite to write for the show, and we've gradually over time started to gravitate toward more of a script format than a prose format. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's a long way of answering your question. That yeah, the way I came to it was just by being a fan of the medium and of story itself, and you know, some skills that I picked up whenever I was doing Ninth Story podcast and editing and playing with audio and effects and things like that. And yeah,
because I've kind of taken a bit of your philosophy that you've always had with the Wicked Library and whatnot, in that what I've done with the Week Talk of Dreams community, what we've done as a whole community is we grow together. So the philosophy behind the Wicked Library is that you're helping up and coming authors basically get an audiobook of their short story, and in return they let you use the story to then have it be part of the podcast, and it kind of becomes a collective. So the way the Wicked Library works is that it's always been anthology, and so for every episode, I mean, some authors may do 2 or 3 episodes a season, but things have changed as things have gone on. But the idea is that we'll have a season, we'll have a different writer for each story, and then there'll be different voice actors for each one. Back in the day, it was up-and-coming voice actors or just people that you knew yourself. That's quite common, I find, in podcasts as well, is that people make podcasts, it seems to be like a collective group of creatives, artists in one way, so you always have like voice actors or actors or writers or artists, or, you know. And I truly believe, especially at the start, that's so important, because you all grow together.
Mm-hmm.
So it stops becoming just like Dan's making a podcast, but it's like Dan has a podcast featuring all these people with him, And you still have to work night and day to make this podcast a thing, but there's something quite nice to know that you're not doing it alone. That when it gets released, there's all these people who you get to share it with, and then it's like the butterfly effect, right? So you release this episode, and then the voice actors say, "Hey, look, I've worked on this episode." The writers do the same thing, and then they'll share it to their friends. And the idea is that your bubbles start growing, and it's beneficial for everyone involved. Especially when it's something like a podcast, because podcasts, most part, are free to listen to. So there's no sort of paywall for people to jump into. It's helping people to get into it, and then if people want more of it, then obviously they can help support the shows and whatnot. Which I think is probably what attracted me to podcasts and made me stay in the first place, is that as podcasts, you are much more connected to your audience because it's so much more on a smaller scale as opposed to TV and film and video games. But then you've got the opposite side. Say when you're writing a book and you release a book, other than your sort of like reviews on like Amazon and whatnot, you don't really have a face-to-face connection. What if I say face-to-face? But podcasts to me is a way of making you connect with people that you wouldn't normally connect with. And it makes the stories, I feel, much more personal. Both because you literally put your heart and soul into the work, but also because listening to podcasts can be quite a solitary experience, because most people kind of listen to it when they're on their own, as opposed to, I mean, I'm sure families do. I'm sure there is like a family night somewhere in the world where people sit down and listen to like the No Sleep podcast or Welcome to the Night Vale and whatnot. But on most part, it's quite solitary. It's the same with like YouTube or whatnot. You kind of watch it by yourself. Thank you for that, Dan. That was really interesting. My next question then is kind of like the biggest question, in that how do you get started? If you were going from ground zero, say you have the idea of what you want your podcast to be, what are the steps to make your podcast go from something you've written on paper to something, to make it a reality, to make it actually become a podcast? What will be your sort of roadmap? Big question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's the answer is a little bit different depending upon what type of podcast you're doing. So I mean, there's discussion podcasts, which is pretty similar to what we're doing right now, where we're just kind of talking back and forth about something. There's audio drama. There is the kind of similar to what the Wicked Library is, which I kind of feel is in the audio drama arena, but it's kind of not, because some people are very purist about what they call an audio drama. Like, it has to have sound effects and it has to have actors going back and forth with lines and no narrative description and that type of thing. But I mean, really, whenever you look at audio drama, it has to be something that is audio and it's drama. And, I have a more loose definition of it. But at any rate, so the first thing is understand, and I can speak to it a couple of different ways, because Ninth Story was a discussion and interview podcast. The Wicked Library is an anthology podcast. What do you call it? Sorry, I had a phone ringing here, and I answered it so that it wouldn't ring and be annoying. But then I realized that I'm actually talking. I actually had the phone on, so someone's just listening to me talk. Anyway, so
It's okay.
So, and then you have The Lift, which is an audio drama. The Private Collector, which is an audio drama. There are things that so I guess your question is really very basic, though. It's basically, what do you do to get started? So you have to know what your concept is. You have to know what you want to accomplish with it. I think that when you get into podcasting, it can't be for your own gratification. I mean, I do a lot of things behind the scene that people never see. What we do is focus on the authors, the artists, the composers, not me who's hosting it and putting all this stuff together. I mean, I get my gratification from seeing that people enjoy it and consume it and listen to it, and that, people connect with each other. So you need to figure out kind of what your goals are. But I mean, if you're being more practical in terms of like nuts and bolts, you need to find a podcast host. Which is where you store your files. So that would be like Libsyn or Spreaker or Blueberry or Audio Boom. There's a ton of them out there, and it all depends on what your needs are when you're getting started. Now, I host on Spreaker because there's some ad revenue, which helps me offset the costs of the show, because unlike in the very beginning when nobody got paid, now everybody gets paid.
Yeah.
And so it becomes quite expensive whenever you're trying to pay everybody fairly. So you need to figure out what your budget is. Are you doing something where you're going to be hiring multiple voice actors? Are you doing something more like what we're doing here today, where it's an interview or discussion podcast? The budget on those is much, much lower, because you're not really paying anybody, right? Except for you and maybe your co-hosts, but you're not paying yourselves, at least not in the beginning. Website hosting, I personally, and there's different opinions on this, I personally think that it's important to have a repository where you keep all your stuff that you own. So I can put all my stuff out on the podcast host. I own it, but it's not stored locally. I save all my files locally and on backup drives. And I also, have the website where it links out to stuff. So the website can eventually become more of a nexus. Like we just recently added written reviews and recommendations of books, horror books. So that's something that's exciting for me, because I've wanted to do that for a long time. And I think it's kind of goes hand in hand with what we do. So all those things kind of roll together to help grow your audience and your listenership, which is, in the end, what you're trying to do is get to a point where your listenership is as large as possible. That's going to be the best for the people that you're trying to promote. It's going to be the best if you're trying to, some people get into it because eventually they do want to make money at it. If that's your goal, then, listenership is extremely important. If you're trying to promote others, listenership is extremely important.
I think that was
so, yeah, I mean, I guess
you were saying is that you kind of have to define what your goal is.
Yeah.
Because if your goal is to make money, then you're going to have to find a solution where the cost of the episodes is lower and you can produce more content, which is why you see the majority of podcasts in the world be mostly unedited, long haul, maybe one or two people doing a chat like this week after week after week after week. I think it's really important to say just off the bat, if you're coming into this to make money, audio dramas very, very, very rarely become profitable. It's quite rare just to be able to get to the point where people are getting paid. So just to emphasize that point now, audio dramas is something which you kind of have to do because you love making audio dramas. Sorry, Danny, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to emphasize that point.
It's very true. I have a full-time 9-to-5 job, which covers health insurance and pays my mortgage and all that other stuff. And it gives me a little bit of extra money every month that I throw into the show. So in and above what I get from Patreon and through ad revenue, which all goes back into the shows, I'm constantly putting my own money into it. Usually between $300 to $400 a month of my own money goes into creating the shows. And that's been the beginning. Since the beginning, I've always kind of put the same amount in. It just now means that I can pay people a little more or pay people who weren't getting paid before.
And sorry, carry on, Dan. Sorry, I said thank you because someone just subscribed. Sorry, carry on.
Awesome. Hey, that's what it's all about, man. Yeah, so I mean, the nuts and bolts are, like I said, website hosting and social media is a big part too. I waited until we had 10 episodes of Victoria's Lift before I put anything on iTunes, because then, and maybe we're getting into more nitty gritty stuff like trips of the trade. So every subscriber in iTunes, when they subscribe, it affects the algorithm and in terms of how iTunes ranks your podcast. So, I waited until I had 10 episodes and then I posted them all together, because then every subscriber had, and I think at the time the algorithm may have changed, but at the time the maximum was 10 downloads. So like when you subscribe to a show, it automatically would sign you up for 10 episodes of that show. I think it may be lower now. It may be like 4 or 5. It also depends upon whether you're using Apple Podcasts, as it is called now, through your iPhone, or if you're using something like Podcast Addict or whatever you're using to listen. But at any rate, the idea behind that was, if I get 10 subscribers, then I would have 100 downloads as opposed to 10 downloads. So at the very beginning, that helped
I
that
see.
helped throw the podcast up higher in the charts. So it got a little more attention. It got into new and noteworthy, and things like that help you get new subscribers. iTunes, Apple Podcasts is still the big, it's still the elephant in the room. I mean, they are 70% of the downloads that we get, 70% of the listens. And, we went from the Wicked Library when I took over had 250 listeners to today where we have around 35,000 listeners. So,
which is, it's, I cannot stress how weird it is to be in a room. I keep saying something, but this room isn't that big. I can just about stretch out my arms, maybe a bit more, and I don't hit anything. To have something you do in a room that gets listened to so many people, it's unfathomable to actually picture that many people listen to the show. Like, and because it's worldwide, it blows my mind that there's people like waiting in line to get a donut somewhere, and it's just like, oh, they've just heard me play Victoria's music box. So, it's just I still can't get over it.
I can tell you one time, Nico, I was going through a drive-through and I heard the person in the car in front of me listening to the Wicked Library, and to me that was the coolest thing.
That's amazing. Oh, that's so good. I like that so much. But you touched on a really good point about getting a website. And I've kind of always, well, not always, but the more experience to get within the industry, especially being a musician, I think it's important to have a place that's your own home for your arts. Because it's one thing to have a podcast on the feeds. For me, it's music being on Spotify or Bandcamp or whatever. There needs to be like a hub where someone can go and it's just drenched in your theme, your show, your home. Because I feel like if you don't have that, then you're kind of like a passenger throughout all these other avenues. So with iTunes, with Apple Podcasts or Spreaker or whatnot, it's nice to be in those other passenger places, but you need a place to go. This is what it means. This is what the Wicked Library is. For me, this is what We Talk of Dreams is.
Yeah, I mean, it gives your true fans, and I hate to say true fans, I would say your more rabid fans. Even that sounds terrible. You know what I'm saying? There you go. That's right. The more engaged audience. Yeah. These words have such negative connotations. They're just words, folks. So yeah, it gives them kind of a place to delve deeper and go into things. I think it creates it can heighten that loyalty. It can heighten the engagement with your audience. I mean, especially, we had this conversation before, Nico, about like before you started streaming, creating music, and me, whenever I sit here and I record or edit or create the website or create the posts or go on all the stuff that goes behind it, it's so solitary. So it's just me and facing this little corner of my room with this microphone usually in front of me, or at least these monitors and this keyboard in front of me, and it's all I look at. So it's nice to actually be able to have a way to go a level deeper and engage with your audience, and to know that there's somebody out there listening to it. And one of the ways that you're succeeding, I guess, in a way, is when you start to get a negative review or two here and there. We'll talk about that too, because that's a huge hurdle for a new creator. Whenever you get reviews and they're all great, and then somebody throws a turd at you, and it's just,
it hits.
You got to learn to deal with it.
I think that'll probably be a good one to end with. Because it's a really important part to take. It's when it's that moment when it's no longer just your friends and family listen to the show or people you know. It's when you start getting people you don't know coming in to listen to what you do. It's amazing. It's very incredible and it feels very life affirming. But you do basically open yourself up to the wider world. But before I dive into that, firstly, thank you so much. And I think you answered that way more in detail and above beyond than what I could have done. Because I would have been like, well, write it down, get a microphone, record it, edit it, whack it out there, and that's your bun. That's your tea. So thank you for that. The first question is from Seely. Hey Seely, hope you're doing good. So they ask, as the podcast market becomes even more oversaturated, what are your tips on creating something that stands out? What do you think people should focus on to help them get that edge?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this in a couple ways. The first way is probably it has to be something you care about. It has to be something you love. If you don't love it first and it's not something that you're into, it's not going to work. There's an old adage in the writing community, which is, you write what you love and what you know, not what is selling. So there may be a huge market or a huge, like everybody started to write vampire fiction whenever, what was it? Twilight. When Twilight took off, everybody wanted to write that kind of story because that was great and everybody was looking for it. It's the wrong thing to do unless that's your bag. Like if that's what you're into and that's what you want to write and that's what you love, then yeah, do it. And you'll probably be successful at it. But there's a dash of knowing kind of what the market is interested in and whether or not you fit into it. So I would say the best way to answer that is probably the way to make yourself is to stand out is a couple things. First and foremost, that you love it. Good cover art. Hire somebody, an artist, a graphic designer, somebody who can do good work for you and create stuff. Nico, you recently went through branding, so you know how important branding is and keeping things consistent. Cover art's really important. It's the first thing that people see. Your content has to be good. Use the best quality microphone that you can get, that you can afford. Spend the time to edit. Make sure that and I can provide resources for lots of stuff like this. I mean, I may start doing kind of a stream myself at some point. But
you want to do streaming yourself, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of resources out there. Like Booth Junkie is Mike Delgadio. He does a lot of tips on recording, treating your space, making things sound clean. There's a lot of free software, and there's also software that's kind of cheap and still really good. I mean, I use Adobe Audition, which is not super cheap, but it's not the most expensive thing out there either. It's really good for what I do. And then, little things like writing good show descriptions, having good sound. And I'd say the most important thing, and this is one of the things I've struggled with the most over the last year and a half myself with Victoria's Lift specifically, due to health issues and a bunch of other things that have been going on, like the world, depression, things like that. But consistency, making sure that you're getting something out there, picking a schedule and sticking to it. If the content's great, you'll still have people that will find you and listen to what you create, regardless of the fact that there might be pauses between what you're doing. But really, in order to have a devoted and a engaged audience, you have to keep them engaged. So my personal tip is create and record a number of episodes before you release your first one. Once you finish your first one, it's great and you're excited and you want to get it out there. I would have a few episodes in the can already ready to go and another series in various stages of development so that you can stay on top of it, because the last thing you want to do is put an episode out there and then wait 3 or 4 months before you drop another one. And then, a little thing that I mentioned earlier, there is an algorithm that Apple Podcasts is very, very protective of. So I don't know all of the ways that it works. I know some of the things that I've kind of gleaned, like reviews are important. There's a community of people that create these things, and we all talk to each other. Not all of us, but most of us. Yeah. And there's two sides of the coin. There's like reviews. Do you read your listener reviews on the show, or do you not read your listener reviews on the show? I like doing that because it engages the listener. It's my way of paying attention to the people that are actually listening to the show. I've never really, and I might be wrong because nobody may have never said anything, but I've never had a listener complain about somebody reading reviews in the show. The only people I've heard complain about that is other podcast creators. Like, why would you waste your listeners' time with these reviews? Well, your listeners are what makes your show. So I respect them by sharing their reviews. And this also encourages other people to review the show, which then means that your ranking is going to increase, because ranking is a huge part of the iTunes algorithm. So there's, the ranking, the rating and review. It's not just the star rating, it's the review. So a star rating has a partial impact. A review on top of that, like a written review where someone takes the time to write out a sentence or two, and then listens. So I know, folks, I tend to be very verbose and I go into a lot of detail.
I like it. I really
but
like it.
but those are all things that are relevant to your question. Like, how do you make it stand out? It's getting that ranking, making it look attractive, good show titles, good episodes, interesting topics, good storytellers if you're doing audio drama or anthology or fiction of some sort. And just remembering that the only thing that once they look at your show and subscribe, what they hear is all there is. So your audio's got to be good. I can't tell you how many podcasts that I've listened to because the story is good, but the audio is just horrible. You can tell it's somebody on a cheap mic in their mom's basement, and it's just awful. The story is what keeps me engaged, but not every listener is going to be that patient.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like you have to make the best of what you got. And what we mean by that is, whatever your budget is, go for the best you can get. If your budget is low, in some cases you may not have a budget, you will have to make that up somewhere else. So say you have really bad microphones, you're going to be spending much more time editing it. And if you're going to be editing it, you can kind of hide. There is some tricks. Like if you've got bad audio, the biggest trick, music and wax some reverb on it. Little bit, don't make it sound like you're in a cave, but reverb kind of hides a lot of sins. But the biggest thing I'd kind of say, my personal opinion on how to stand out, and mine's much more general, I guess, for any sort of art, is be you. And I know everyone says this, but you accept who you are, both as a person and as an artist, and make that your forefront, because nobody else can do that. There is no one else who can do you just as well as you can. People can be like a really second-hand cheap copy of Neil Gaiman. People could be a really cheap, tacky version of Hans Zimmer, but there's only one of them. Just like there's only one Nico, there's only one Daniel Foytik, there's only one of yourself. Make that the forefront, and through that, make sure whatever you're responding to your audience, whether that's like Daniel was saying, reading out the reviews on the show, or whether it's how you talk to people on social media, or whether you do the streams, be you. I cannot stress it enough. Like, if you look at YouTube and you look at streamings or podcasts, so many people are kind of running through what someone has told them the algorithm is, but they've not put the personal touch in it. So if you did what Daniel was saying and said you read out the reviews, but you did it only because you wanted to climb the ranks, people click onto that super quickly and then get turned off because it doesn't feel personal. You can tell someone who's just reading it because they want the boost, as opposed to someone who really cares about their listeners. So for me, the more genuine you are, the more of your personality you put out there, because that's the other thing as well. There's only one you. Because there's only one you, your personality you put in the show is going to be wildly different to everyone else's. If you make that the strongest bit, you're going to be separated from the people around you. You will always kind of find people better at a specific thing than you. Like, there's loads of people who are better composers than me, like like theoretical based, or can make, the best horror music, or, and it goes to like podcasts. Like, there's people who have like the best editing, or there's people who's got the best voice actors. No one
comparison is the thief of joy, Nico.
Yeah, and it's like no one really goes to these shows like No Sleep Podcast or Shadows at the Door or Magnus Archives or Victoria's Lift and go, oh, well, I kind of wish the editing was like on that other show. They don't do that. They come to your show because they want to hear that world. That's always going to be the most important part. I think the biggest takeaway for me is you have to work hard, But don't believe for a second that means it's because your skill level isn't good enough. It just means you have to work hard to put as much of you into that show. Because I say this all the time, but you're ready to go as you are. You are already enough as it is to get started and to go into it. You will learn through experience, through the ups and downs, you will learn how to get better at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the kind of the tools. You yourself, the product, lead with that, is what I'd say. But yeah, you are right saying comparison is the thief of joy, Dan. Sorry, this has always been a topic which I think has been really personal for myself, in that people want to tell you, if you've not got the qualifications or if you've not become from a specific background and whatnot, and people want to believe you're not going to be good enough. And it's like, nah. No, just dive bomb in, yeet yourself in, and see what happens.
Yeah, done is better than perfect. I mean, I can tinker with stuff constantly, and it's never going to be perfect. It's one of the things that happens whenever you start to create stuff. There's a great piece by Ira Glass, where he talks about taste, and we start creating things because we have good taste, and we know in the beginning when we're creating these things that our taste is higher than what we're actually able to create, but we still creating because eventually if you do it long enough, you get to the point where your taste equals to the quality of what you're producing. And if you're doing it right, that taste is constantly getting higher and you're constantly trying to catch up to it. So you look at something you did 6 months, a year ago, you're always going to look back at it and go, ooh, I see all the bruises and bumps on that. I could have done that better. But a lot of other people aren't going to see those bruises and bumps because to them, it's just something brilliant that you made.
It's kind of like the thing I always found when you sort of critiquing yourself, you like you're saying, you tend not to see yourself, you tend to see like the artificial points. So like say when I'm doing vocal cuts, vocal edits for people, I can tell when like, oh, I've cut the breath off too early, or I've taken away too many of the clicks and the mouth sounds, so that T is no longer as pronounced as it used to be. I do that quite a lot.
Oh, Nico, I love that you get this because, this I know exactly what an looks like in podcasting from whenever I used to do Ninth Story. I used to know how to edit. I know what a plosive P looks like without having to listen to it. I can go through and fix things, and I know what a breath looks like. So when you're looking at the waveform, you can kind of tell these things. Yeah. So I love that you get that because I've done the same thing. I'm like, damn it, I got rid of the end of the T now.
Yeah, and it's like, only you're going to notice this. They're not going to notice that. They're going to hear that the voice actor just saying the words, but you're just like, yeah, but they used to sound like... Anyway, that's... You kind of roll with that. You always are going to critique that. But the thing I always find when you've left it like 6 months to 12 years, and 6 months to a year, not 12 years, I've not been doing it that long yet. You go back and you're not actually paying attention to it anymore. You're actually just hearing the episode as a whole. And it's like, oh, I'm actually really bloody proud of that. It may be the opposite. You maybe hate it. But I've tend to found the stuff that I've always given my all to, I'm always going to be proud of it. Because it's more, to me, it's kind of like a diary point. This is what I was like back then. I'll listen to an episode. It's the same for when I soundtrack, when I compose. Like, we've recently did one of Victoria's Lifts for Pride Month, the Why I Take the Lift by our friend Mark Nixon, who you guys know from Shadows at the Door. That was one of the first episodes I scored for at all. Like,
yeah, Mark and I go back a long way.
Yeah, so...
long before Shadows at the Door, Mark Nixon wrote a couple of stories for Victoria's Lift, back then called The Lift.
And, yeah... I remember exactly what I was like back then because it was 2016. And just trying to figure out how do I make this, how do I score for podcasts, and I learned the hard way. But it all works out. The next question, well, there's quite a few. Which one do I want to do? Okay, I've got two that I think are quite important. One of them's pretty much a short answer. So this one's from Jessica, one of our mods. What's something you wish someone had told you when you first started out in podcasting?
I think it's part of what I was talking about. So I'll let's see, Nico. I'm gonna see if I can put this in here. And you can maybe share that with everybody. So I put it in our Skype session, which is.
Oh, you guys should be able to see this now. Yes, but yeah, bear with me. But carry on. I can get people to see it. Carry on speaking.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see that instead of me, which is a huge improvement.
I've got that back.
So it's called The Gap. It's by Ira Glass, and it's a great piece for anybody who creates. And it's one of the things I wish I had known when I first started out, which is that I'm very hard on myself. I'm very much a perfectionist. I have a little mug here that says progress, not perfection, to remind myself that is the goal, right? You keep working on something and you're always going to get better at it if you keep working on it, and you're constantly trying to improve. If you keep working on something, just doing the same thing, and you think you're great, then you're never going to improve, and that's a problem. But I wish someone had told me exactly that you're not going to be happy with what you make at first. And as you get better and you spend more time with it, eventually you will be. You just have to be brave and get that out there. And the second thing I wish someone had told me is that you're going to get nasty reviews from people who are not your intended audience. And that's where the way I look at it now, that if someone leaves a negative review of something, I mean, there are negative reviews that are helpful. But if someone just leaves a negative review for the sake of being nasty or putting their own opinion out there, like I had one that I read after Pride Month episode about, that we're catering to the lowest common denominator. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I mean, it essentially is like, you're catering to complainers. And that's totally not what was happening, but I'm sure your audience is evolved enough to know what we were actually doing, and I don't need to go into that. But like those kind of reviews, to me, they get me so angry. Like we had one review once, it was like, stop having women narrate. Men are just better. It's just like stuff like that is just stupid to me. Like, why would you say something like that? But what that tells me, when I look at it the right way after I get over being angry, which I still can't stop myself from being angry when I read something like that. I'll have 15 great reviews and then one negative one, and that one negative one gets under my skin every time. I think that's human. But what I tell myself and what I believe is that I've weeded out somebody who doesn't belong in my audience. I've weeded out someone I'm not making the show for. They're either not going to listen again, or if I keep producing the show the way that I think is right, eventually they won't listen anymore. So those two things, like negative reviews, are not necessarily a bad thing. It means that you've reached a larger audience than, like you said, Nico, your friends, your family, the small group of people that are your supporters and cheerleaders in the beginning, that you're now getting into a larger audience where, as long as, we have 4.7 stars out of 5, that tells me that we're doing our job. If we had 2 stars out of 5, then I'd worry that maybe I might need to think about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
So
it's I think it's a really important point to note. Like you said, it is human nature. You will kind of pick out the critique a lot more because you're your own harshest critic. And even if you get a review that isn't based on facts, your mind still plays into it because there's always a voice in your head which is telling you, well, you didn't do this bit right, you didn't do that bit right, and 99% is just them being angry for no apparent reason. But you sometimes you kind of think you're reading between the lines, and maybe something's there. Eventually, you will figure out how to tune that out. But when you get started, it will happen. I will say, you generally don't get those reviews until further down the line. It's once you start breaking out of like the people who know you. Once your show starts getting like ranked in iTunes and whatnot, when it starts popping up in places that you've not personally put it, that's when it kind of gets put into fresh ears from people who don't know you and they don't have any personal connection to you. So they kind of have that strength of anonymity. I can't say the word. Anonymity.
Manamana. Manamana.
But yeah, the thing I'd probably say I kind of wish I knew as I got started. Oh, it's a tough one. I think for me, it's always being true to who you are. I think for me, it's really important to trust your gut, especially when you're working, when it's not just you in a show, right? You're working in...
You heard that, did you?
No,
I got to turn my ringer off. I forgot. Sorry, Nico.
When you, it's fine, don't worry. It's loosey-goosey. It's streaming. It's fine. It's loosey-goosey. When you're working with people on a show together, if the vibe isn't right, if the connection's not there and you're kind of forcing it, it's more than okay just to stop working with that person. Similarly, if you're in a position where you're creating and you've discovered you're creating something that doesn't really feel like you anymore, which is quite common. It's more common than you people, I think, realize. It's more than okay to say, I'm kind of retiring this thing and I want to do the thing that actually is more myself. So
yeah, I don't want to interrupt you, Nico, but that actually that's one of the other things I wish someone had told me when I first started. It's okay to take breaks. Whenever you get burned out, or like you said, whenever you realize that something is not you. It's one of the things I love about doing seasons of podcasts, rather than just doing like 1 through infinity. You can break those seasons down, and each season kind of gives you an opportunity to reinvent yourself if you want to or need to. I'm sorry, go ahead, bud.
No, it's absolutely right and fair to say. I think I get told this a lot because I think people in the We Talk Agents community know this about me already from one way or another. I constantly get told I'm working too much and I'm putting too much in myself. And one of my friends the other day basically said, there's going to come a point where you'll realise you're the person who's doing this to yourself. It's not actually people putting that obligation on you. You've set that standard. And it's actually fine just to say, I'm not in the mood to make a podcast this week, or I'm not in the mood to stream this week, or I need to let go of some of the projects I work on. You always have this fear that people are going to suddenly turn against you, or that you're turning your back on them, where in fact, from my experience, is that people are actually much more happy that you're doing self-care. Mm-hmm. And if that's not the response, the feedback that you're getting, that people are happy doing self-care, then it kind of justifies why you need to be taking that break, because then you start realizing, well, if this isn't the community I want, if this is not the relationship I want, maybe I need to go and find a healthier place. I think that's kind of true in every aspect of life, but yeah, I think it's very important. And we need to I say this to remind myself as well as giving advice to other people, because I kind of find the more I do these streams, the more it's kind of self-help for myself, to remind myself it's okay that this is what it is. It's okay that you're not working as hard as you did maybe a week ago. These things go up and down all the time. And I think the reason why I do We Talk of Dreams, and the reason why I like doing these chats in this community, is that I've said this from the beginning, and I've kind of put it on Twitter recently, is that this place is my home. It's before We Talk of Dreams, before I turned it into what it is, I was, like Dan was saying, I made music for podcasts. And even though that's amazing and it's a thing I really enjoy, without the people there listening to the show, without the people chatting to me every day, whether it's through the streams, through the Discord, through Twitter or whatnot, without the connection for me, I don't see the point of it. I very much feel like people are the reason for what I do. I got really deep then, I didn't mean to, but it just went that way.
Gotta be you, Nico, gotta be real, man.
But just to close up the show, the one final question, and I'll kind of do the outro. I think this is actually from Jessica again. Yeah, it is. Jessica says, can you give us a dog name? So if you've got a brand new dog, what would you call them? Which I think is quite a nice thing. So you don't know what I'm going to call my dog one day, and you're going to be very happy.
That's hilarious. Yeah, you see, I knew we would eventually get to a serious and important question here. So, so I have two dogs now. One is named Bobby, and the other one is named Sam. What would I call a new one?
Whilst you're thinking, I'll tell you what mine is.
How about Merit?
Oh, I
I
like
think that would be
Merit.
fun.
I like Merit. Oh, did I just drop one of my comfort? Oh, I did. So,
It's
as
Victoria's
you may or not
brother's
see
name.
behind me, I have a comfort crew, Dan, which is various plushies. Which
I know, those are awesome, man. I'm so jealous of your plushie collection. That's awesome.
And then
The
this
ravioli
one-
is the best.
this one was
The
actually made for
orange.
me.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is Beeps. So I'll kind of give you the rundown. This is
Okay.
the
I
mascot.
can't. Now I can no longer say the pasta one's the best. Now they're all the best.
So this is what started. This is Beeps.
That's the one that started it, right?
Yeah, this is my mascot. This is Beeps, who generally just kind of sits there. Then you've
We
got
make beeps and boops.
Beeps and Boops. That's basically it. Why we call him Beeps. This is Viola, who's a ravioli and feet. I'm gonna put these back because I can't carry them all. Then you have Gabriella the cat, which is very nice. Then you have Mark the gnome. It's Mark with a C because they're
Mark.
French. And then the final one is you're gonna show off your Victoria thing, aren't you? Yeah. The final one's little jelly bean in a jar called Bert. And you've got Victoria. You may need to move it a little because right now she's just like completely white, shining face.
Yeah, there's too much light.
But Victoria, the life and breath of Victoria's lift. But I'm gonna call my first dog when I get a dog Ravioli. I quite like the name. Oh, you got a little
I like
dog.
that.
Yeah, I quite like the name of naming a dog after pasta.
Too much light.
Too much light.
How about that? Is that better? I can't see now. I closed my screen
It's a
down.
little better. It's still basically bright white lights with the green eyes blaring through, which kind of works. I feel like that works.
Yeah, I've got a collection of Victorias. I also have one that's in well, she's not actually bronze, but it's bronze toned. The same sculptor that made the statues did that, and then this was a fan sent me this. This is a peg person, a little peg people Victoria.
So thank you, Dan, so much for coming. As we're
You're
closing
welcome.
now, where can people find you? Where would you like people to find you?
Oh, geez. Just go to ninthstory.com. There's links to everything else from there. And that one is pretty simple. It's the number 9thstory.com. And then you'll find links to the Wicked Library and Victoria's Lift and the Private Collector, which is, all the stuff we do. All the stuff.
But on that note, thank you, Dan, so much for coming. Thank you everyone for coming. You've been amazing as always. Thank you, a huge thank you to our mods who do an incredible work of getting everything ticking along. The next stream, okay, so just a little bit of an update. I'm getting my second jab the same day as the next stream, which is a week today on Thursday, July the 8th. So that stream may get changed. We'll kind of see how it is after getting my jib jab. We shall see. But I'm excited to get my science juice. Huge thank you to the mods. If you'd like to support what we do here, you just being here is more than thank you enough. You can also support us financially by becoming a subscriber of the Twitch channel, or donating through Ko-Fi, or subscribing by being a patron on Patreon as well. And all the money I get goes to help buy new equipment for the streams, helps me pay my mod team, and basically keeps the light on over here. But a huge thank you for coming. I'll close out with my artist of the week, which is Celie, and you can see her amazing artwork of Beeps, as is most of the artwork is always Beeps, because Beeps is beautiful. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and yeah, see you all next time. Bye everyone.
Thanks, everybody.